To the program, Canada's deficit is on track to hit $330 billion, and the federal finances are barely sustainable. That is the latest from Canada's budget watchdog. Now, that number is actually less than the government predicted, but it's far from over. Parliamentary Budget Officer Yves Giroux put out a new report today. But can Canada afford the cost of the ongoing pandemic? At what point do the books become, quote, unsustainable? Let's bring in the press gallery. Bob Fife is the bureau chief with the Globe and Mail. He joins us here from Ottawa. In Montreal, Le Devoir's Emily Nicolas joins us, and our special guest is the man of the hour, the Parliamentary Budget Officer himself, Yves Giroux. Great to see all of you here. Mr. Giroux, I just want to start with you to explain what will the deficit, I mean, you're talking about $330 billion. Do those numbers include the expanded programs that the government is expected to pass tonight?
Yes, these numbers include all the expenditures that were announced as of September 1st. And because the expanded programs, such as the CRB and the sick leave programs, were announced on August 20th, they're included. They're included, however, with the parameters that were announced on August 20th, not with the program's parameters that were announced as part of the negotiations between multiple political parties. But they're included in the numbers, that we released today.
By the way, I appreciate that you're outside amongst the bus traffic there, which is the rule. But just to be clear, when the Liberals made the deal with the NDP on expanded sick leave and then to increase the $100 a week so everyone will still get, who's on the CERB will still get $500 a week, that extra $100 and the expanded sick leave, not included in that estimate, right?
Exactly, not yet, because we didn't have time to factor in that into the release because of production timelines, obviously.
I'll come back to that, but Emily, they're going to vote on these tonight. It's a shortened debate. What do you think these paid sick leave and these other measures, what will they mean politically for the Liberals? And you know, obviously, I think all the parties will probably end up voting for this stuff.
Yes, it's basically, although it hasn't been voted yet, it's basically a done deal. And I understand that people, you know, we haven't seen deficits like that in living memory. So it's understandable that people would be worried about that. But I just also want us to perhaps consider what would be the economic catastrophe without these measures, right? If we let business collapse, what is the cost of that? Is something that's not necessarily calculated. And there's also some benefits to the measures that are there. For example, if you have childcare program that helps women get back into the workforce, they then pay taxes, they then spend more, pay more taxes on goods as well. So that's not also part of how we calculate the cost of a measure. So we need to also be very careful in terms of those in terms of how we make those calculations, for sure.
Yeah, Bob Fife, you know, the Liberals just weeks ago were saying we're going to start scaling back the CERB, scaling back the wage subsidy. Now the wage subsidy is extended till next summer. The CERB, essentially in a different form, is going to remain. What questions would you have to the government? And I think Emily made a great point. No one's begrudging the need for support here, but what questions would you have about it?
Well, I mean, I think the whole issue of this debt, which could, we've been there before in the late 1980s, and we ended up, the World Bank was, International Monetary Fund was going to close us down, basically. We had to, under Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, had to make significant cuts, real big cuts, including very significant cuts in healthcare. So I think the government is doing the right thing and making sure that we protect people, particularly if the second wave leads to lockdowns. But the Parliamentary Budget Officer is really making a siren song here that we have to be careful how we manage this money. And I do think there's a responsibility on Parliament, which is to oversee the government's purse strings, to have a serious debate about how this money is being spent and what are we going to do to get out of this debt spiral that we are facing. You know, the Liberals' throne speech is full of other very, very expensive measures that could end up bankrupting the country. So I do think we need that kind of debate, although, I mean, I think everybody is in agreement that we have to provide these support measures right now to people in need.
Well, there's not a lot of debate. I should say it's going to be under 5 hours to debate these because they're pushing this through so quickly because things are ending. Yves Giroux, I just want you to explain quickly. A lot of folks are saying, okay, we need this. These are numbers we haven't seen before. But people keep saying, what's the fiscal anchor? I think that's a phrase a lot of Canadians need to understand. What is that, and what questions do you have about the spending?
Well, the fiscal anchor is an objective that the government sets for itself. It can be long-term. Usually it's medium to long-term. And in the 1990s, we had a fiscal anchor under Paul Martin that was budget balanced, or balanced budgets rather, come hell or high water. Then under the Liberal government, it was a declining debt-to-deficit ratio. More recently, from 2015. So it's important to have a fiscal anchor because that sets the framework for the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister to make spending decisions, and it allows them to more easily push back on the multiple requests that they get from their colleagues and from various stakeholders for additional spending. As you can imagine, if you're the Minister of Finance, you are faced daily with multiple demands to spend and spend and spend or reduce taxes. So that's something that allows the minister and the prime minister to push back and set themselves some longer term targets, and it helps them to also determine their priorities and what's in the realm of the feasible while achieving their fiscal targets. It's also very helpful to enhance the credibility of the financial conditions for the country.
Glad it's warm enough, by the way, for you to be outside. Emily, by the way, just on that vote, I just want people to appreciate, there's going to be a confidence vote on these measures tonight. The debate has been shortened by the Liberals. I appreciate they're on a time crunch because the CERB is going to end, but is that fair to the opposition and to Canadians not to get any debate on what will amount to close to $40 billion of spending?
It's interesting. Well, Jagmeet Singh, who's usually, would be actually part of the opposition, and he still is, but I think he said something today to the effect that usually he understands that debate is important, and he would himself be pushing for more debates. But because there's an emergency in terms of CERB ending, he's willing to make an exception, basically, because the livelihood of a lot of Canadians is hanging in the balance, and so. Yes, it's not desirable, to make a habit out of it. Let's put it this way. But I think for that reason, I think a lot of Canadians actually would not be happy to see Canadians the Parliament debate this on and on while they still don't know whether or not their money is going to be coming in for the first of the month.